It is officially official. Help a Teacher Facebook live every Monday night, 7 p.m. Central. And man, I've been looking forward to this one. Every once in a while, there's somebody in education, and I don't know, we come up with these ridiculous titles like edu guru or edu influencer. And what I love about our guest tonight, he is so far from falling into that self-described category. He believes, like I do, like there's not a campus that neither one of us have ever been to where we're walking on a hall, we see some amazing teacher in the classroom completely changing lives, and we're like, oh my goodness, there's the guru in room 3. And so this dude, Joe Beckman, started writing a book months ago after everybody that's ever seen him speak have begged him to finally put one out, and he got the ball rolling and got the party started, and it is finally out. And I'm here to tell you, man, I can't. The reviews and the people posting pictures and pages that they've been highlighting in this thing, I think it's just one of those. It just goes along with everything that this guy puts his hands on, and that, I mean, it's a life changer. And I can't wait to talk to him about it tonight. Joe Beckman, all the way from the frigid, I think he's up somewhere close to the North Pole. Is that right?
Yeah, I am basically next door neighbors with Santa Claus.
Yeah.
About that. And it was snowing 2 weeks before Halloween, but now it's done that thing. So Minnesota, if you blink, the weather changes, right? Especially this time of the year. And so today it was shorts and a t-shirt. And a week from now, it'll be like a snowmobile suit and a stocking cap. So you never know what you're going to get. It's we have the most schizophrenic sort of fall/early winter, I think, of anybody in the country. But I'm here and I'm excited and I'm warm on the inside.
Hey man, I saw one of those giant lottery winners. Somebody won like millions of dollars. They asked him how he picked his numbers, and he said he picked it by the daily temperatures in Minnesota, and it was like 7, 34, 72.
Wow, he must be just on a hot streak.
Right. Yeah, man. So hey, let's get right into it. So you've been on the road. I don't even know how long. If you go all the way back when you were doing kid programs and bringing schools together and shifting culture in schools and on your own and doing keynotes, you've been on the road for a long time. And I just want to know what took so long to finally write this book.
Yeah, man. I would say this is that this thing right here, there's a lot of blocks that say who's going to read a book that you would ever have to write. Not only that, but you have no business yourself writing a book, especially for teachers or school. Like, you didn't even go into school to be an educator. Like, what do you have to share? And so there was a lot of battling in my head of just personal things that I had to get over, and some mental humps that I needed to sort of climb over. And I really had to figure out, like, what did I want to write a book on? You know what I mean? Like, what was important enough that people would stop what they were doing, pick up a book and read about it. And so I just kept going back and forth in my head of like what this could be about. And we started and we stopped and we started and we stopped. And finally it dawned on me, dude, that keynote talk that you give resonates with everybody. It resonates with high school kids. It resonates with middle school kids. It resonates with adults. It resonates with teachers and educators and parents. So why not take that and really just kind of like, expand on it a little bit, or really go into a deeper dive. And so that talk that we've given in high schools and for staff development now for the last 5 or 6 years, that talk is what this book is really based on. And then we just added a few more ideas to it and a few more, anecdotes and studies and things like that. But yeah, that was kind of that was the hard part, was figuring out, do I even have what it takes to write a book? B, will anyone even read a book that I even read? And C, even if they did, and even if I did, what the hell am I going to write a book about, right? Like, I didn't know exactly how it was all going to go into order. And so, this is a manifestation of all of those thoughts and all of that experience over the last 20 plus years in schools. And here we are. We have this nice little book. And it's what's crazy about it is when you pick it up and you hold it, it doesn't look like this took me 3 years to write. Like, you'd be like, Like, I'm pretty sure a seventh grader can write about as many pages as you did in a matter of a month. But it really, after you take it and you twist it and you turn it and you rewrite it and you do it all over again, and it's a lot of work. And sometimes it's like, wow, it doesn't even feel like all that big of a book. But what I guess I love about that is that I feel like it's a finishable book. You know what I mean? It's something that when you read, it's not so intimidating that you're like, I am never going to be able to get through this. You can pick it up and read 5 minutes and you'll get something out of it. And you can pick it back up and read it for 50 minutes and you'll get something out of it. So I love the fact that it's not super overwhelming and that it's not, Pride and Prejudice or something like that. It's something that you can sit down, you can finish, you can give to somebody else. They can pick it up. You can give it to your 8th grader. You can give it to your 12th grader. You can give it to your grandparent and they will pick it up and they will read it and probably get something out of it, because the phrases and the stuff that I'm talking about is so universal that it's like, it almost kind of feels like, dude, like these aren't even like all those original of thoughts. Like these are stuff that people have been saying for years. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It is. And sometimes some of it feels like common sense. But in 2020, I don't know about you, but common sense doesn't always mean common practice. And we get into these ruts and we get into this, this like sort of rhythm of life that so often gets us out of what is common sense, like what our common practices turn into, don't always make a whole lot of sense. So this book hopefully just kind of reminds people of what they already intuitively know, and hopefully gives them a few tools and resources around human connection that will help them with the relationships they have in schools or in their lives, and with some of their own self-care.
Yeah, man. I think when I look back at all the whether it's your keynote or my keynote, I mean, the odds of a dude like me or maybe you coming up with something completely cutting edge and absolutely original and on the and on the verge of new neuro study and is really, really, I mean, rare. And so what I think what your expertise lies in, which is the same as a lot of great teachers, is being able to effectively communicate the content in such a way that somebody finally gets it.
Yeah.
Where like a kid, just like a teacher in the classroom with a kid, where the kid has heard the information before, they've already went through this, but finally they met a master teacher who can present the information in such a meaningful, emotional way that it resonates with the kid. The kid understands it and it stays within that kid for the rest of his life. For me, that's what a great teacher is. And I think that's what makes a great keynote. And not only that, but also a book.
Yeah. I think you're right. Absolutely. And that's kind of what I think the power of the book is. There's nothing in this book that you're going to go, I don't understand what he meant by that. Those words were too big, or that was too complicated. That's not it. They call me the happy caveman. I'm not the brightest bulb in the drawer, right? So like, I wrote the book for somebody like me who struggles at sitting down and reading something like this, to really wrap your head around it. And I think the other part that all of us can remember is how powerful stories are. Like, especially stories where you fail and you're not that great in. And this book is laced with stories of me screwing up, messing up, falling flat on my face, striking out in the bottom of the ninth, the bases loaded, or whatever it may be. And I write those stories and I use that sort of point of view because I think there's so much authenticity and just humanity and being real and being honest and really talking about your lumps, not just the time where you knocked it out of the park, but where you did mess up or strike out or fall short or whatever it may be. And this book is really full of kind of bite-sized stories, which story in itself is amazing, but stories where I sort of don't have it all figured out. And so I think there's a real uniqueness and authenticity in something like that.
Like I was saying before, man, at the top of this thing, this whole concept of, and it really has to do a lot to do with social media and just, Instagram and filters. And, oftentimes that those of us on the road, people have this image in their mind that, we have it all together. We have it all figured out. When the truth is, I'm not sure everyone would admit it, but I know that the dudes and the ladies I hang out with that do what we do are the first ones to admit it, that, oh my gosh, man, like I can't tell you how many dumb things I've done in the classroom, how many times I failed, how many times I've dropped the ball. I mean, just complete ridiculousness. That's absolutely humiliating right now. And that is why I share so much of that stuff, just like you do in your work. Like, I think it's critical that people understand that, no, man, like we don't even like, remotely close to have this thing figured out. Fortunately, what we do have is just a couple of ideas and a couple of distinctions and anecdotes and analogies and stories that we can communicate some content in such a way that it really resonates with someone's heart.
Yeah. I almost look at being a speaker almost like a stand-up comedian, in that you have to be super observant. You have to be able to say things in a way that people nod their head rather than raise their eyebrows, if that makes sense. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be something that you say that's the first time they're hearing. It's the thing, like you said, that they've heard for the fifth time, but finally the other four times that they've heard it, finally it comes together and it makes sense. And so, yeah, I'm in full agreement with you on I believe that is, if we're doing our job the best, we're getting people to do this, not, this sort of like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
man, I've always said this about my audience. I'm 99% sure, like you could verify this would be the same thing for your audience. And that in the moment when we're in the thick of it, we're deep into the mission of what we're doing on stage. I have a feeling that here's what I've noticed. I really have three types of personalities I can see in those moments. One is those folks I'm affirming, like this is true for them and they get it and they love it and they need it. It's like sometimes when you take a bath, the water cools off. You got to heat it back up, and we're heating it back up. And this is who they are in the classroom. And absolutely, there's that affirmation group. And then there's a group that's a little bit more introspective because they're thinking, yes, that's what I signed up to. That's who I signed up to be. I don't feel like I ever got to that point. Now they have some tools and strategies and ideas, and so they have this moment of recognition where yes, this is what I want to be. But then there's that third group, and they're leaning back in their chair. They oftentimes have their arms crossed, and they look like they're a little suspicious. When I first started this thing, I really thought that they hated me. They're not all that. But what I've realized over time, for some teachers, this is a moment of a little bit of an emotional pain because they have to admit, I've said some horrible things to kids, and
Yeah.
there's been some hurt, and they're dealing with that so they can come back around to where they've always wanted to be. And I think for your audience, there's probably some of that going on as well.
Yeah. And I would say all of them are equally important. As a speaker, what do we want the most? We want people coming up to us and nodding their proud and telling us how awesome we are, or how, I've always believed in this and you're saying the right thing. But quite honestly, you could say the most important of those three groups is the latter of the three, the one that really needs to wrestle and figure out, and that they might not give you one sort of look of positivity. They might not come up to you afterwards, but ultimately they might, honestly, if you think about like most valuable player, the most improved sort of player in like a year, or the most improved teacher, it might be someone in those shoes, because they've really had to like overcome some habits and some maybe patterns that they've fallen into. And I don't know about you, but no matter who you are or where you are at in life, habits and patterns that you fall into are really, really hard to break out of, especially if you feel like you've been doing it well or you've been doing it right for so many years. And then someone comes in and says, you might want to, think twice about that. I think sometimes we fall into the trap of, man, we feel the accolades. Those are the talks that we feel the best about. But sometimes the best talks are the ones that actually have the most impact. Are the ones where people are quiet afterwards, or crossing their arms in the audience, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, there's definitely a selfish component to it when I first got started. Absolutely, where I'm like, I wanted, the mountaintop moment and all that, and but now that I'm deep into this, a decade into this thing, where you're right, man, it's those moments where sometimes the impact is when they sit in silence and really reflect on not how awesome everything was in those few minutes, but what they're going to do moving forward. And that does take some time and some reflection, and now, like, those are the moments that I crave, that I love the most. And for you, man, with your book, did you have a goal that when you sat down and you have nothing on your Word document and you're about to hit the keys, did you have a goal going into this thing, or did you just think, let me just get started and see where this thing goes?
Yeah, it was, let me get started and see where this goes. And so that's kind of what I did. And I was able to create lots of different, I always call them the Tetris pieces. I got the block and I got the long skinny thing and I got the weird S looking thing and I had all these different pieces, but they weren't lined up in the right way that they needed to be lined up in order to make like the correct rows. And so I had all these staggered sort of like stacks that didn't seem to like, weren't super coherent. And so the goal was just to start. And I'm kind of a, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of there's a mindset of like ready, aim, fire, ready, aim, 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 fire, and fire, aim, right? Like I just kind of throw it out there and let the universe do its thing, and I can kind of pivot and shift and tweak it once it's out there, but I just kind of have to throw it on the wall and see what resonates with me and with other people and then build off that. And so a big part of it for me was just kind of knowing that the first year of this could be what feels like wasted time, but it's all very necessary in order to get to the part of the project that you feel good about. That it's all part of the finding out where the pieces sort of like fit together. And so that was tricky, but that's kind of how I roll in general: is ready, fire, aim. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but I do think it's important to have balance. Like my wife is a ready, aim, 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 aim. Let's aim a little bit more and then fire. But in fact, let's go aim a little bit more and see and regret that we fired at all. Like she balances my other side of that out really, really well. And I think where sometimes I get into trouble is when I don't have those speed bumps in my life to be like, hey, just slow your roll a little bit, which isn't always good to hear because you just want people to, you want especially the people in your life that you love the most, be like, you're awesome, this is great, and I believe in every idea that you have. And sometimes I got to remember that just because it's good for me and it falls under that same sort of rhythm that I normally do things at, it's not always the best for everybody else.
Yeah, man. For me in that creative process, anytime I do big projects like that, whether it's a new keynote, it's a workshop I'm going to do, one of the things I've always done is I just have this stack of 3x5 cards on me all the time. And I write an idea on the three, I write the main point on one side, on the blank side, on the line side. I put some ideas and details on there. And then I just generate, and it creates this huge stack. And then eventually what I do over time is I usually I move some furniture so I have some room on the floor and I lay them all over the floor. And
Ah,
then I stand up on the chair so I can look at these things like this
yeah.
bird's eye view. And then I can start shifting and shuffling. And then I'll pick up cards. I have no idea why that was written and what I ever wanted. That goes in the trash. And then I just start moving around. And then for me, that's the way. Sometimes it doesn't work every time, but sometimes I can generate some flow to this thing. And typically I do it in a full circle. I call it the Seinfeld circle, where if you remember Seinfeld, they always start with one concept and through the show, it always comes back to that
Yeah.
one thing.
Yeah.
Well, I do that. And so I shift these cards in such a way it comes into the circle where I always come back to that very beginning moment.
Yeah.
And for me, man, that's kind of how my creative process has worked for me. But you're right. When it comes down to it, it's like doing it. That's the key.
That's
Like
the
you get
key.
is to do it.
It's just to get out there and to do it and to know that it's not always going to be pretty and perfect. And there might be some days where you get one word or a paragraph down and that's all you got that day. But at least you showed up. At least you got there and you gave it as much as you possibly could. Because it's really, really easy. I would get into this rut where I go, I'm just going to put the book down for a little. I have no ideas today. I have nothing to give to the book. And then it's so interesting because the next day I didn't feel like I had anything to give to the book either. And since I get, the day before I didn't do anything, I can probably get away with this day too. And that turned into weeks, you know what I mean? And there'd be times when I wouldn't give the book any attention. And it's not as if 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, all those, days that I didn't put any attention into the book, all of a sudden my ideas came back to me, right? Like you have to just continue to show up every day, do the work, and that's where like the solutions or the magic or the light bulb moments I think come when that's just not as an author. That's a teacher, that's a parent, that's a firefighter, that's a police officer, that's anybody who's doing anything, either for the first time or at any time in your life. Like you have to, I think, just be able to be okay with it not being perfect.
Yeah. For me, a lot of those moments, whether when I was preparing for my classroom or preparing to get on stage or writing a book or doing something creative, it's kind of like working out or something where you like, you're waiting to feel it, man. I want to feel motivated. I want to feel inspired, man. That feeling's going
Yeah.
to come any day now. I'm just going to wait
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
And for me, like I did that for years and just doesn't work. What I have found, there's two things. One is just discipline, like you said, man, scheduling time and doing the work. It doesn't like I'm not waiting to feel it. This is what I do. And then that becomes who you are. And then the second thing for me is I think sometimes we lose track of is just having clarity. Like there's so much inspiration and motivation and clarity. And I always ask people to think back to a time when they felt most inspired, most motivated. Even if that's a school, like when school culture is really on point and everybody's driven and excited and motivated, and we drill down into what it is specifically, it's when everybody is super clear on what the mission is and what the goal is and what we're trying to do as a school family. And clarity for me, and what I've discovered in my life, man, that's like the number one thing to really drive inspiration and motivation and creativity and just my mental health.
Yeah, and you're right. And we think that is going to come to us, but it's really about doing the work to figure out and to get that clarity. That's something that you sort of earn, right? It's not something that just kind of comes to you, I don't think. And so it's kind of an oxymoron, and think you would think it's just this light bulb moment that comes out of nowhere. I've got clarity, but it's based on showing up every single day, and then it's through that sort of discerning process of just kind of throwing different things on the wall where that clarity sort of becomes exactly that, clear in your mind what it is that you really. And that was it for me with this book. It was like the clarity came through the work, and it was like, oh right, about a year, and I went, I think I know what I need this to be, but I had to like show up and do that work before that clarity sort of came.
Yeah. Hey man, I'm wondering for if you've ever noticed this as well. I know, especially when I was teaching, this is when I really picked up on this for me. Is anytime I felt myself in a low spot, whether it's just connecting with kids or inspiring, just being excited about work, what I tended to do is I would go and find somebody that was also like I could tell, I could see, I could find somebody I could tell was just a kind of mediocre and just not, they're not into it right now. They were struggling, and I would go help them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and it's kind of that concept that we become all that we give away. And so if
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't feeling inspired, I would go inspire other people. And if I wasn't feeling courageous, I would go encourage other people. And through that, I mean, I can't tell you how many great ideas came to me after brainstorming sessions with other people.
Yeah. Christopher Reeves, the first Superman, who became, I think he was quadriplegic. He was bucked off a horse and was completely immobile. He was asked, do you have hard days? I think it was by Larry King, and he said, yeah, I do. And on those days when I'm feeling overwhelmed and completely like, woe is me, he's like, that's exactly when I figure out how and what I can do for somebody else. Because when I'm doing something for others, I forget about, that mentality. And that's what really drives me. And I think it's a little bit of a balance, right? Because there is both. Like, you have to take care of yourself first. I talk about that in Just Look Up, the book. I talk about the importance of taking care of you. But I think that's part of that clarity that we're talking about. And I think that's where that clarity comes from, is by giving yourself some time and some energy, to really focus in on what your values are, what your strengths are, and then figuring out how to use those strengths to serve others, right? Ultimately, that's why we're here on this planet, to somehow, in some way, make our world a little bit better, a little bit stronger, to add a little bit more peace or kindness or whatever it may be, to make life a little bit better tomorrow for others than it was for us today. And so, like, ultimately, that's what we want to do. And in the process, I think it works differently for lots of people. Some people, you gain that sort of like, you gain that confidence by helping others. And for others, it's, you have to first gain that confidence by focusing in on you. And I'll give you an example. So about, 13, 14 years ago, my wife and I had that conversation that no husband and wife really ever want to have, where she sat me down and basically said, like, Joe, if things don't change, changes are going to be made. Like, if you think we're going to have a family, and you talk to me the way you talk, and your anger is the way it was. I was a really angry person, and it's still something I really struggle with at times, where it comes out, sort of like out of nowhere. That's just kind of how I'm wired. And she basically told me it was kind of put up or shut up time. We weren't going to be able to continue on going at the pace we were going. And so for me in that moment, what I needed to do was I needed to reflect back on myself, and I needed to get some self-care in and figure out where I was struggling and why I was struggling. And one practice that I sort of really adhered to, and I still do to this day, is a gratitude practice, where I would wake up and I would write things down that I was grateful for, and it would sort of help me see the things that were good rather than all the things that I would focus on that weren't good. And it was that sort of self-care that I did for me that really helped me be better in many ways to her and other people around. I still struggle with this, but the more I do that practice of gratitude, the better I am at it. So it's a little bit of both. It's like a yes and. You got to take care of you, but ultimately, I believe we are here to ultimately take care of others.
With that whole self-care piece, brother, that is, you're right. It's such a balancing act where that, so gratitude, that's a great example of what, man, if I want to be more appreciative in my life, I need to not just do that for myself. I need to show others appreciation as I spending moment with my gratitude practice. And in addition to that, I think sometimes we get caught up in only giving, especially teachers, this idea of self-care that, listen, you need to relax, take care of yourself. And it turns into this thing where I'm going to lay on the couch and binge on Netflix and have a glass of wine. And listen, there's a time and a place for that for sure. But
Totally.
in addition to that, I think, self-care involves a balance of not just what we want to do, but also doing those things that we need to do. Man,
Sure.
there's so much inspiration and motivation and just emotional fuel happens when you take care and check off the list one of those things that you should be doing, but for some reason you just haven't gotten yourself to take that first step.
Maybe one of the best things you can do for self-care is to do one thing every day that makes you uncomfortable, which,
No.
that's an oxymoron. That's not self-care. That's like doing something that, oh, dude, when you do something that pushes you and challenges you, whether it's working out or, a 15-minute meditation, or whether it's, going out and wrestling with your kids, even though sometimes that's the last thing you want to do, right? Like you want to just veg out or whatever. But when you do something that pushes you outside of your comfort zone, what ends up happening afterwards, the benefits that you get, that's all about self-care, right? Because that's where like the true self-care comes into play, the real authentic stuff, not the stuff that, hey, go binge watch a bunch of Netflix shows and eat a bunch of bonbons and that's called self-care, because at the end of the day you feel like crap after that. It's the opposite, you know what I mean?
I'm not even
So,
sure what a bonbon is, to be honest with you. And man, Tobin's chiming in, man. Tobin, man, our homie Tobin, he's
oh
said
man,
also, yeah, he's letting everybody know as well. It's those moments that we take risks, and as a result of then, man, there's something emotionally balanced. I think human nature, we are in order to be happy, there has to be challenge, there has to be striving forward and doing the stuff we know we need to do, as well as doing something that feels risky.
yeah. And that's how growth like we are designed to grow, to be better tomorrow than we were today. And I think the one of the best, it's not the only way, but it's one of the best ways to be better tomorrow than you were today, is to challenge yourself, right? And so Tobin, he's a good dude and a very wise guy. And yeah, he's awesome. You know that we met in Arizona?
I saw pictures of you guys hanging out. I was
Yeah, dude.
jealous.
It was really, really cool. It was really, really awesome. It was just random. It was there, and I saw that he had ordered a book, and he was from Phoenix, and I was speaking in Gilbert at a pretty big high school there, and so I just reached out to him, and I've seen that you've been back and forth with him, so I'm like, if Hal thinks he's cool, I'm sure he's cool, and we got together and had a few beers, and I'm telling you, he's as good as they get, man.
Yep.
He's a really, really good dude.
Man, I think what it is in that taking that risk, whether who knows what it is. It's something different for everybody. But what what it is, man, the fuel, because there's so much fuel and emotional health that lies in the glory. Like that's where the glory is, doing something really challenging, taking a risk and doing it, achieving it. Man, there's so much power in that moment.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I started playing guitar as I've been doing more live events. And 5 years ago, if you would have said, Joe, are you going to bring out I think actually my business partner, Scott, was like, you should maybe think about, and I was like, I'm going to stop you right there. Because if you say, bring out that guitar, I'm going to say, it ain't going to happen. Because that's just not what I'm going to do. But the more I started thinking about it, the more I was like, that would actually add a whole bunch of everything to my presentations, to the adult presentations, to the student presentations. And so I started, figuring it out and learned a couple chords. And lo and behold, here's the crazy thing. And this, I think, applies to everything in life, is that if you know about, 4 chords on a guitar, you know about 80% of the songs ever written. And so now I bring my guitar out, not because I'm a great guitar player, but because I know those 4 chords and a few more that allow me to play a handful of songs that, make my presentation a little bit better and easier to follow and stay awake in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because presentation. And yet every time I go up there, there is that twinge of like, gosh, this is when I really start sweating through my shirt, right? It's like, because I know that is the least good I am at probably anything in that talk. But I also walk into it with that same sort of vulnerability. I say, I'm not here to try to wow you. I'm here because someday I want to wow somebody in this. And I really think, stepping outside of your comfort zone that allows us and pushes us to grow and to be better. And so I use that as almost as a metaphor and as an anecdote, but that's an area in my life that I've really tried to stretch myself in, and is music and getting out there and playing songs live in front of people.
Man, I love it. I always, it's one thing I've always done with my classes is, I challenge myself to learn something publicly in front of kids. And I would talk about it. Here's what I'm working on. One year I decided to learn how to juggle. And, it was just something. I'd learned how to play guitar. Like, it was one thing after another, but it was because I wanted them to see what a learner looks like and see what an excited learner looks like. So I love it. And you're right, man. I think it's Todd Snyder, singer-songwriter guy. He said the difference between a free loader and a free spirit is 3 guitar chords. Yeah. Yeah. Hey man, here's one last thing I wanted to ask you is for those you have a kid in college who, mom read the book and then gave it to the dad and he read the book and now they gave it to the kid in college and they're reading the book, and that book is going to go on the bookshelf of that kid in college, and years from now, 20, 30 years from now, that student is going to hand it down to their child. And when they hand that book over to their child and said, hey, listen, your grandparents read this book, gave it to me. I read this book and I'm giving it to you. And here's why. What's the why, man, that you want to be in the mind of that person as they pass on the legacy of the book?
Yeah, because here's why. When I look back at my high school experience, I don't know about you, but I was a few decisions away from being a really good guy. And when I look back, the reality is I was a decent guy. I was an average guy. And honestly, what I needed, Joe Beckman personally, was one person to come in and speak a message to me that would have given me the permission to go from good to great. And I never got that speaker. And so I believe there's a lot of people who are right on that edge. And my hope is this book gives people the permission to be a little bit better, to serve a little bit more, to strengthen their own self-care or their own impact in this world. And my hope is that this is the book that where somebody goes, finally, somebody who said it, like we said at the very beginning, right? Like the light bulb goes off and they are able to get that little bit of inspiration that will help them take their legacy to a completely different level. Like I look back, there were so many moments where I could have said something or done something or stood up for somebody. And I had that, I was right there. Right. And if I'm just thinking, I know me, I know how I'm wired. I know if I would have heard a powerful speaker or read a good book that said, no, dude, like all those thoughts in your head that you think you're the only one who thinks about, no, those are actually pretty universal. And there's a lot more. And really, you have the permission to say the right thing or to do the right thing. I know I would have, but I never felt like I got that. And so my hope is that this book is kind of that extra little thing that you might need. I was saying to my wife's a pretty deep spiritual person. And I knew she was going to read it. And I was like, listen, this book's not going to really help you all that much because you're already there. Like, you're probably at a 7 out of a 10 on the spiritual sort of like, scale. And this book might bring you to like a 7.5 or an 8, but it ain't going to bring you too far because you're ahead of me on this. I know you are. But if it's somebody who's at a 2, I bet this will bring them up to a 5.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot more people who are at a 2 than there are at a 7. And so my hope is that the book resonates with people who are, either in the middle or at the beginning of their sort of their journey, their emotional journey, their spiritual journey, or whatever kind of journey that they're on, navigating through this life. And so yeah, I guess ultimately that's my hope.
It's awesome, man. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight, man. I really, really appreciate it. I love all the work you do. I love following you online. And man, I love that the world has you.
Hey, man, I'm so grateful that our paths cross. I guarantee that somewhere in my gratitude practice, Hal Bowman, your name is somewhere on that list of just people that have just helped me take my game to the next level and raise my confidence. And when a guy like you, who is as charismatic and as influential as you are, sees some of that same stuff in little old me and gives me the time to like have conversations and to talk about and like we have conversations offline that people don't talk about, no one sees. I just want you to know how much that means to me as somebody who's walked a little further on this journey than I have. And so whether you know it or not, whether we've ever talked about it or not, these small little conversations that we've had have given me confidence, honestly, to write something like this. So
awesome,
buddy, because you really mean a lot to me. And I don't say that just to blow smoke. I say it because I really, truly mean it.
I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, dude. You're awesome.
Have a good night, man. Thank you.
Take care, Hal. Bye,
All right.
guys.